making his way through an entire Imperial starship, essentially untouched. He parked his car, walked all the way in, got to the bridge, didn't break a sweat. And that's the Luke Skywalker, I think, that we all wanted to see.
Yeah.
And we get to see him. I'm really excited for this month because we are just going to be talking some of the greatest hits of the Star Wars TV shows. So it's kind of fun getting out of a little season of talking about one show the whole time, and then you get to just do what you want. And we're just running all the greatest hits this month.
Yeah, I was thinking this week, because I don't know if you realize this, but we started doing this a year and a half ago. We've been doing this for a year and a half now.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's pretty wild. But
yeah,
our first thing we covered was Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And so it's fun because we're going to get to talk about stuff that you and I haven't ever sat down like this and talked about. Because, we talked about it afterwards. We texted and stuff. But it's fun to sit down, and we'll go back to some shows that we've never actually been able to sit down and break down. So
that's such a good
once
point.
I thought about that, I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty fun. We haven't done this before. So
yeah, I've never considered that. Like
we've...
How cool would this have been if we were doing this like on screen for The Mandalorian? That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Like just sitting, I mean, we were talking about it the exact
out.
same way, just not with a camera rolling. But
yeah.
So
the camera it'll be fun
keeps
to go back to some of these huge moments and talk about them.
Yeah, no, for sure. So today we're talking the Mando season 2 finale. So when you're talking like greatest hits of Disney Star Wars streaming shows, I mean, this is probably, I mean, as far as like the masses, this is probably the one, right? Like, I don't know. I have not met the person who is like, oh, that episode's terrible. Like that person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I'm sure they do, and they're fun to hang out with at parties. But like, I think probably 99% of Star Wars fans think this is peak Star Wars post George Lucas, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, because Mando it had some steam. I mean, it had come off a really good first season. Season 2 was a lot of fun. And then to finish out with this episode, especially the conclusion that just blew everybody's minds. I mean, it was a big deal. It was a big finale, and it definitely made some waves in the Star Wars fandom. So
Right. Well, we had just come out of the sequels as well. And so, like, love them or hate them, the Luke Skywalker reaction to the sequels, it's not what people expected, regardless, right?
The fan base was not united at that point.
Not united on the Luke Skywalker front. So, I don't think any of us ever expected to see a live-action Luke Skywalker on the screen in this Mandoverse of all things, right? Like they've done a pretty good job of like, oh, they weaved Ahsoka in, but like Luke's off doing Luke Skywalker things. I don't think he fits into this bounty hunter story. They got us. I mean, that was incredible.
No, I mean, it goes beyond cameo. It was a bombshell of a character moment. I mean, it was, I don't think any of us expected something. Even if people predicted, oh, we might see Luke, like what we got in this episode, I think was better than anybody could have predicted. So it was so good. Obviously, we'll talk a lot about that scene, but the fact that they kept it secret, it's impressive.
And they used Plo Koon as like a coy or a ploy over it, and everyone was like, well, it's strange that they're going to bring him back of all people, but like it's what the actors even thought at the time. But this episode to me, it's peak Star Wars streaming. And really, I think all the episodes we're going to talk about probably peak Star Wars streaming, but this one may be at the top just as far as the broad appeal for it. So, do I think it's the best episode of The Mandalorian in this season? I actually think as far as storytelling goes, the episode before it may be better, but just shock factor, the delivery, wrapping up the season, wrapping up the story they told in the season, I think it top notch Star Wars. So we're gonna go, show a little bit of clips here and there as we kind of break through the episode. And Kevin, I don't know about you, but for me, I realized watching this that I had forgotten the majority of what happened in this episode, like up until the Luke Skywalker spot. It's kind of crazy.
No, you and I were just mentioning like they had a pretty lengthy recap on this episode, which was very beneficial because, I had kind of remembered the run-in with Boba Fett and Grogu getting kidnapped and all that. But one of the things that may remember is, they talked about in the episode about how he'd go to that Force place and he would be able to kind of like reach out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, there was a lot of speculation about who that would be, or whether it would even be a Jedi, or whether it could potentially be a Sith. There was a lot of fun discussion around that.
Yeah, it was.
So it brought back a lot of that stuff
on Tython
that was thrown around. Yeah, at the time. So man, I had forgotten a lot of the details for sure.
Well, this episode starts off like, I mean, I even forgot this, that like Mando has to go and rally the troops to go get Grogu back. Like they're going to break in and steal him from Moff Gideon. And so we start off here. They go to like this kind of outpost to get Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks and the Mandalorians. And man, Sasha Banks kind of takes
Boba Fett.
Kind of takes it to Boba Fett there. I mean, how crazy is that? I'd completely forgot that the WWE wrestler took it to the world famous bounty hunter, but she did a tornado DDT off the top rope into a table on Boba Fett. I
gotta admit, I didn't love that. I feel like Boba Fett should have been the guy teaching the youngsters a lesson. That's a whole nother story for another time. But he gets it.
Boba. I had completely forgot that Boba got whipped there early, but or actually Bo-Katan breaks it up in that scene because they're shooting, the fire at each other. And so she breaks that up. And then obviously they talk the whole crew, into coming with and getting Grogu and all that. So that was really cool. But like just the fact for how they did this whole season, this is just like a little bit of conjecture on the season. They did a great job at building like a supporting cast around this story that obviously, I mean, we know now 5 years, kind of crazy, 4.5 years, whatever it's been, that they're going to expand on all these characters, right? Like you get Ahsoka early on, you get Boba Fett in this series. Cara Dune, obviously, she's from season 1, and they were going to do the spinoff with her until they ran Gina out of town. But that all happened, and then you've got Bo-Katan, who, I mean, a big focus of the third season. They didn't mention Thrawn. No, they did mention Thrawn in this one because Ahsoka brings it up even in season 2.
Arc in the
And so one thing that I don't think Star Wars always does exceptionally well is they tied in a lot of like legacy type characters, and they tied in a lot of story points that they would kind of expand upon in other series going forward. And yet they still kept it true and kind of wrapped all those guys into this ending too, minus Ahsoka. But really, even like in the flashback, you get a little bit of like, oh, you got to go to Tython and do this, that, and other. Like everything did play into this story. It wasn't just wasted screen time. And I thought that was cool that they get all these people in here and still make a good story out of it.
Yeah, it was. And it was a really good follow-up from season 1, because season 1 they didn't bring in a whole lot. Like it was really centered on this small group of people we weren't really familiar with. And so season 2 they did a good job of bringing in some bigger names and some other characters, but the thing that worked was they kept the focus on our duo here, which I think really shows at the end of this episode, which I think is really impressive. What we'll talk about at the end, but what they managed to pull off at the end of this episode, I think is really impressive from a storytelling standpoint. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they brought a lot of stuff in, and it didn't really detract from Mando and Grogu's story, which I feel like is what got them in season 3. I feel like once season 3 hit, it really pulled away from them, and everything just kind of got in the way. So yeah, season 2, they balanced it really well. And I think that's what makes it so good.
Well, I love too, and this episode, I mean, they do it in a lot of different spots of the season. Like in the previous episode, they get Mayfield in, like, oh, they took the kid. Like even in this episode, though, it's like, hey, they've got the kid, and I mean, obviously, there's some maybe ulterior motives for Bo-Katan and the crew as well.
Yep.
But like everyone is coalescing around Grogu, right? Like we've got to get this kid back, and so that is like what you said. It's perfect that it stays focused on the main characters, and everybody's just kind of bought into that too. So I like that a lot. But the if we keep going in the episode, you see we got the break-in on this Imperial Star. Is it a Star Destroyer? What kind of class ship is this? It's kind of like those Clone Wars.
Light cruiser.
Yeah. Cruiser. Because you see these in the Clone Wars as well that are smaller right before while they're the Republic ones. But you got like all of the women breaking in, and they're just taking out stormtroopers left and right here. Drop your weapon. I thought that was pretty cool. If that were to happen today, I mean, who knows the outrage? But when this happened, I think nobody cared because I mean that was a pretty cool scene, right? If you did it now, I'm sure people would lose their minds one way or the other about it. But I thought it was nice how they broke it up too. So you've got that crew kind of getting around, and then you've got Boba Fett at this point. It's not even with him. Like he got him there, and then he's off to do his own thing. Fennec's going to meet up with him later, but he's off to Tatooine to take care of some business, as we saw. But yeah, they break in one way. Around. Mando's sneaking around, which is like the most classic Star Wars thing ever. Like you got old Ben sneaking around on the Death Star. You got Han sneaking around on Star Killer Base. You got Obi-Wan sneaking around on Geonosis. And then you got Mando sneaking around here going to get Grogu. And of course, he gets himself into a little bit of trouble because one thing that this show did, which at the time, I think we kind of overlook it because we get so caught up on Luke Skywalker. But they brought the Dark Troopers to live action, which is really cool to see.
They're intense.
Yeah. Did you remember the scene where this one here, where that thing just like punches Mando in the face like 12 times
repeatedly through the wall? It
just keeps going. But now Mando does get
one of the things I love, and they've really done it throughout, I guess, all of the Mandalorian, is they consistently highlight the durability of Beskar, just like how awesome that material is.
Yeah.
Like I love just blaster bolts bouncing off of it, takes lightsabers. I mean, like it's indestructible, which I love how much they highlight that. It's such a cool aspect of the Mandalorians. I forgot how intense some of the action was in this. From the beginning where they take over that ship and Cara Dune shoots that guy right in the face. He's got that hostage, and then the fight through the light cruiser, and then I mean there was a lot of action. I love watching Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec. Like she's so good with fight choreography. I love watching her go through fight scenes. It's just so smooth. So yeah, the action. I forgot how good just some of the action sequences were. They're intense. They're quick. And it culminate like one of the tensest moments that we'll get, but just when those Dark Troopers are pounding on that door and they're all just sitting there waiting, like the tension in that moment is like, even though I'd seen it, like I was still like, man, this is intense. So they did a good job with really setting that tone.
The Mando, even in season 3, they do this as well, but they do the pacing in their finales when they're trying to build up, like the stakes are really high. I don't know what it is, but do they always do the same director for the finales? I don't know how it works, but however Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni write this thing,
that's a good question.
They always seem to have that on the edge of your seat pacing for the whole episode. Like you've got in season 1, the finale, they're trapped in that they're in the bar or whatever, wherever they're at, right? And they've got to go through the underground on Navarro. And they're being chased the whole time. Like they just keep closing in on them, and it's so tense. And then in this episode, like you said, they just are continually working through this ship, going through one challenge after the next till they're finally trapped, right? Like they're getting closed in on. And even in season 3, it's the same way. Even when they're taking out Moff Gideon, you get the point to where like the fire's going to get them, right? Like stuff's closing in on them, and it's just always kind of got you gripped at the edge of your seat. And so I really appreciate about that about the Mandalorian. I don't think the other seasons of Star Wars or series of Star Wars actually do that.
So season 1, the finale, was directed by Taika Waititi.
Okay, and then he went on to Thor.
So he was also busy. He voiced IG-11, didn't
he? He did. Yep.
And then Peyton Reed was season 2.
Whoever that is.
I don't even know who that is. I mean, Jon Favreau wrote both of them.
Right. Yeah.
So he was the writer on all the finales, not all the episodes.
But the director is the one who really who makes that work, right? Like who?
So it doesn't look like any of them have been the same. The delivery. So they've just all done a pretty good job.
Great job at it. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So the really, and we talked about this, you and I texted about this, but this next scene we're about to watch, just like a clip or two of it, few seconds. I'd forgot they give this much detail on like Mandalore and the Darksaber and things like that. And Moff Gideon really is setting up season 3, but I think we get, again, so enamored with Luke Skywalker coming back that we kind of forget the season 3 setup that this gives us. Now, again, neither one of us thinks season 3 delivers very well, but this is just like a little preamble to it here.
The right to lay claim to the Mandalorian throne. You keep it. I just want the kid. Very well.
So you got Moff Gideon there. It's a trap. Letting Mando know the significance of the Darksaber. They get to lay claim to Mandalore. And you're like, so what? Mandalore's uninhabitable, and it's just a lightsaber that looks cool at this point. Little did we know, season 3 would eventually get to the significance of Mandalore still being there. Like, you get there at the beginning, and then you go back at the end. But really, I kind of wish... I mean, I like how this episode went. Don't get me wrong. But if they had, like, maybe even dedicated 10 or 15 minutes of the 40 or whatever it is to setting up how important Mandalore was, and then setting up season 3, and then obviously season 3 doing a much better job at kind of landing the plane on Mandalore. But that's your sneak peek right there. Moff Gideon has got some interest in Mandalore, which we eventually do learn about.
Yep. And I feel like season 2 did a really good job of setting up, like you mentioned, some of those storylines that just, I don't know, kind of got lost in season 3. Like Bo-Katan's, her desire to like assume leadership, but like how it predicates on this Darksaber and like the tradition of it. I feel like it's the ending where there's just that weird tension between her and Mando because she wants the Darksaber. She can't accept it from him. Like, I really wish, like, I wanted to see that culminate in a fight. Like, it surprises me that the Bo-Katan we've seen so far throughout this just kind of backs down at that point. Really in season 3 too. Like, she ends up with it kind of on a technicality.
And then loses it.
But yeah, they did such a good job in season 2 of setting up some really interesting things that I don't feel like got a great payoff. But at the time they were like, oh man, this is going to be like, this is tense. This is like, this is not what I expected with this story to go, with the tension now between these two characters. And, Mando, who's just like, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, I just want the kid.
Just want the kid.
Which is cool because he's tried to walk that balance between what a Mandalorian's supposed to be, but he's been obviously pulled away from it quite a bit. So there was a lot of really good things that I feel like they could have run with that season 2 ended on really well. That's a season 3 talk, but
it is. Hopefully we don't have to have one of those for a while, but like just the whole deal, even because you get the bit about the cloning, right? He's just interested in Grogu's blood because it got the midichlorians is what it ends up being. Like all of that just segues so well into continuing a story. And again, we just forget it because Luke Skywalker comes back. Like we don't even remember that they actually did lay quite a bit of this groundwork for what we were going to get in season 3. But I think we only get a couple episodes worth of continuation because you go a few different routes. But I think maybe I need to watch, and I've never done this, I'm assuming you haven't either, but I probably just need to watch all 3 seasons in order
all
now.
the way through.
All the way through, and you probably pick up on some themes, and it may be
Probably
more
so.
enjoyable, but I've actually never rewatched season 3, so
I think I've watched maybe one episode of season 3 over. Yeah, and I mean, can we talk about how cool the Beskar spear is? Like,
oh my gosh, that's what I was actually going to share next.
Like, I'd have much rather Mando kept the spear than the Darksaber.
Yeah,
I love that thing. Yeah. I feel like that should have become like his signature weapon. That thing is so cool.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, he doesn't even have that big rifle anymore, right? Like he is void of all the cool things he's had.
Yeah.
But yeah, this duel was awesome, and again, it is completely overshadowed by what's coming 10 minutes from now.
What does happen to the spear? I don't even remember what he does with it. Who does he give it to?
Oh man, if you're watching this, you're in the comments. If you know,
like I really can't remember
with the spear.
I love the
drop
spear.
It down there. Does it even make it like out of this season? Oh no, he takes it in Book of Boba Fett and he gives it. Does he gives it to the armorer because he's got the Darksaber now?
That might be right.
And she like melts it down into stuff.
Maybe so. That's a mistake. Should have kept the spear.
I think that may be what happened to it.
Yeah, that does sound familiar now that you mention it.
I assure you, we probably won't talk about the Book of Boba Fett and the greatest Star Wars streaming.
Bummer.
So we'll have to talk about that offline. Yeah, not going to make the cut. But yeah, check out this duel. Again, you could just forget about it because Luke comes back, but it is so cool.
I love that visual effect.
Look at that. That's so good.
I love the visual effect of the Beskar like heating up and then cooling off and heating up and cooling off. That's such a cool thing.
One thing too, like kind of just talking about how well season 2 does, is the minute he ends up getting that Beskar spear in whatever episode that Ahsoka shows up, you know, and he gets the spear, you know, at some point he is going to end up using that, right? Like against a lightsaber, dark saber, something. Like there's going to be some kind of implication there. And that's one of those like obvious payoffs, you know, that you get and you were expecting it, but you're so happy that it finally happened. You're just waiting for him the whole time.
It was satisfying for sure
to break this out. And then he does. And that did not disappoint because I don't, how about you? I don't expect much out of Moff Gideon when it comes to combat or anything like that. Because he's not that type of bad guy, you know.
Yeah,
that's not who he is.
He's the plotter, the conniver.
It's pretty good though. There, I thought it was.
No,
good.
It was it was a good action scene. Yeah,
yeah. It was. I'm assuming it was probably filmed in the volume, as was most things that they do.
A lot of it was.
Yeah, but how about the noise that the Darksaber makes as well? Like, is that your favorite lightsaber noise?
It is cool. Yeah, there's something like so dissonant about it. I don't know how to put it. It sounds off, but that's what's really cool about it.
I mean, it looks cool too, right? Like, I mean, check that out. It's shaped really cool. If you get the blade in there, it comes out, you know, like a little bit different shape. So I just
which
think it's a cool saber.
I need to see if there's any official canon reason why it is the way it is. I'm curious, like what's so different about it
like
in its construction?
I mean, the color and everything about crystal. It, I guess, right?
I wonder if that's out there. I'm gonna look that up.
Oh, I'm sure it's
time.
It's somewhere. I mean, there's quite a bit of lore. Isn't today the day that we're filming this? Not the day that it comes out. Wasn't like 15 years ago today when the Darksaber made its first appearance in Star Wars in the Clone Wars?
Oh, is it? Wow.
I think it is.
I had no idea. Man,
I'm actually gonna look this up before we move on. The Darksaber first appearance. Oh no, I'm way wrong. It was January 29th of 2010. So I'm a few days late, but it has been 15 years since.
That's wild.
Since the Darksaber, yeah.
And it showed up quite a bit. Clone Wars, Rebels, and then Mando. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is featured. Especially lately, they figured out how to merchandise off that thing.
Yeah.
So they've
exchanged.
They've got their money.
Been in some pretty capable hands. Maul had it at one point. Sabine Wren had it at one point.
And now it exists no more. But they'll still sell it. Be interested to see if they make another one, maybe, like, you know, how they do. But so Din beats Moff Gideon. He lets Moff Gideon survive, and Moff Gideon's like, "Oh, this is going to be interesting," because he knows what's coming next when Mando walks into that room with the Darksaber, and Bo-Katan wants it.
That's such a good line to rewatch, because you're like, "Oh, this guy knew the whole time that this is going to be a thing." Yeah, that was funny.
It was a win-win for him, regardless. Either he beats Mando, or he gets to watch Mando have to fight Bo-Katan once they get back to the bridge. So, that was good. Now, they don't get to that point. Mando's just like, I yield, or whatever. Like, take that. Which is funny. It's that character development. You take this guy who's just, in season 1, he's just a stone cold killer, or not a killer. I mean, at times, but a bounty hunter. And now he's to the point where he's not even up for a fight. Like, he goes from fighting Cara Dune in a bar, right? Doesn't he fight her early on? And then now he's like, take the sword. We've got Grogu now. So he didn't seem to care. But then, I
gotta say, one of the things that bothered me, though, is it doesn't make a whole lot of sense
of why you can't just yield.
Well, yeah, because really, if that's the case, Bo-Katan shouldn't have it anyway, because Sabine gave it to her. And so if she wasn't the rightful person to have it, did Moff Gideon really win it from her? So did Mando really win it from him? Or does it still belong to
Sabine?
Well, Sabine just found it, though. She didn't win it either. That's the thing. Like, who is it supposed to belong to right now?
Who got it who ended up getting it from Maul? How did that work out?
Well, did Maul leave it there for some reason? Because they found it back on Dathomir.
Yeah.
Like, that was where they had that weird episode where, like, the Night Sisters possessed Kanan, and and she had to fight them. It was a crazy episode.
That's in season 3. That's season 3, right? Or no, or is it early season 4? Either way, it's
so if anybody can make sense of that for me, I'd appreciate it.
I think there's so much gray area that it did let them kind of wiggle their way around it. But they get
minor complaint.
Well, all of those dark troopers, that were they kicked out of the vacuum? Is that how Mando took care of them? They're back.
Yeah. I guess he didn't know they had rocket boots.
And they don't have to breathe in space. So this is where the tension comes to a boiling point in this episode. So they're on the bridge, they're all in there, and then the dark troopers are about to break this door down. They're so stoic. Start hammering that wall. And obviously, like, things are not gonna go well when they
I
gotta
come into that room. I did not remember how long this silence, or this dead moment went, where the only noise is just the pounding of those. Like, it goes on for several minutes, and it really builds that tension up. I had totally forgotten about that, how long that scene was, because looking back on it now, I'm just like, when's Luke coming? Where's the X-Wing? But I gotta imagine, like, going back to first watch, that had to have been super tense, not knowing what's happening, but just that pounding over and over, and watching those doors buckle. And they really don't have any options. I mean, they're pretty much done at this point. So I love that few minutes of just deadness with the characters, where it's just building.
Right. Well, I had already in my mind come up with what was going to happen once they did break in. Because I thought they were just going to mimic season 1. So I was going to ask you what you initially thought, because for me, I thought, okay, they're going to break in, but they're not like breaking into a helpless room. Cara Dune's pretty bad, right?
Yep.
You've got Bo-Katan and Sasha Banks. What's her name in the show? Casca Reeves. You've got Bo-Katan, Casca Reeves. You've got Fennec, who could just be off in the corner making any shot she wants. I mean, she's like the best sniper in here. And then you've got Grogu, the secret weapon, who something will be going down, and then he'll just, put both hands out, and he'll take out every dark trooper and then, like, pass out. That's what I thought was going to happen.
I think
he was going to be the one that took care of him.
Some variation of Grogu doing something, or even, taking Gideon hostage or something,
Right.
But not the way it went. That's not what I was expecting. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had no doubt that they were going to make it out. I just assumed it was going to be Grogu that was, because they build him up that way. But no, I mean, this one thing right here changes everything, because when she says an X-Wing, did your mind immediately go to Luke, or were you like, oh, what's going on here?
No, it did, because there it is.
An X-Wing.
One X-Wing? Great. We're safe.
I did, because I remember that was part of the discussion leading up to this episode, because we had this episode where Grogu had reached out to someone. And so there was a lot of talk about, like, could Luke Skywalker show up? Is it going to be a Sith? Is it going to be another Jedi who survived? So I think the fact that his name had already been at least thrown out there, that maybe it would be a cameo, right? We might see his face or something. I think it was already kind of on my mind when the X-Wing came up. And I was like, oh man, are we really doing Luke Skywalker?
Well, and it's so good because they're watching like on that little screen, and it's just, obviously it's a Jedi. Yeah. I don't think my mind went straight to Luke, but then like obviously you figure out really quickly, oh, there is one Jedi that has an X-Wing. So you get him, you get him on the little screen. They're watching it first, and the look on Moff Gideon's face when he figures out. I mean, look at this.
Yeah,
that is just like
he's
terror.
Concerned. Yeah, he is no longer having fun in this situation.
Yeah. He knows exactly who it is too. Like his character, he knows exactly who it is. But I mean, from here on out, this is just pure Star Wars euphoria. So good.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but like, you know, to the rest of these people, Luke Skywalker's, it's a name, it's a legend, but Moff Gideon, like, this is the guy that brought down your empire. Like, this, like, he's got to be on your mind. He's got to be on your radar. I hadn't really thought about Moff Gideon immediately understanding who this is and how bad it was for him. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking like, oh, this one guy took out, because as far as they know, Luke killed the Emperor and Vader. They don't. No one knows how it actually went down, and so to them, like you said, it's the guy who single-handedly brought down the Empire. So he's probably thinking, "Well, man, I'm no Vader at this point." So he knows he's toast. There's no chance at this point. And then this is, in my opinion, the most iconic scene that Lucasfilm has put together post George Lucas. I don't think. I mean, you could say like, oh no, it's the Vader hallway scene.
Yeah.
I think you can put I think that scene's awesome, but you can put anyone in a Vader costume and pull that off. The fact that you could bring Luke Skywalker back after Mark Hamill's like in his 60s at this point, maybe even older, I'm not for sure. This is not something anyone expected. And so for me,
I think you're right.
This is the scene.
Yeah, because like the Vader scene is obviously incredible, and it's just the imposing, intimidating Vader. The Rogue One scene is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's Vader, and we've seen Vader, and we've known that, like, we knew where Vader was, and this is not just Luke Skywalker. It's Luke Skywalker during a time we haven't seen him, and we don't know what he's doing, and so it's not just, oh, Darth Vader being hardcore again. Oh, this is Luke Skywalker, like we've literally never seen him before.
And like so we never would see him. You know what I mean? Like the Luke Skywalker we got in the sequels was not this Luke Skywalker. Not that it was, I mean, again, polarizing, but like this is not what we thought we would ever see in live action. And then you get this. That when that elevator dings, like, oh man. I love the caption. It says elevator dings.
Elevator dings. It's useful.
Just so iconic the way they were able to pull this off. Like, again, you never expect that. And then it's just Luke getting down to business. You just saw the Mandalorian, who is as formidable of a fighter, non-force user that you've seen in Star Wars. I mean, you can put him up there with anybody. Yeah. And he can't handle these dark troopers. And then you've got Luke taking out 24 of them. Right? Yeah. I mean, he's just, he's going through, he's got that one scene where he crushes
breezy.
That is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about the way he fights and the choreography they did is they didn't take it back to like prequels where he's not like spinning and flipping and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. But it still feels very reminiscent of watching these Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters like take out battle droids in the Clone Wars, like watching Obi-Wan and Anakin just mow through a horde of battle droids. Like it feels very similar in just the ease and the movement of it. And so I like that they really kind of captured that feeling that you see in the prequels of like, man, these guys, they're not even touched. Like they don't even have to try. Like it still has that feeling with its own sense of choreography. It's not as like crazy, but you just have that sense of like, okay, here's a Jedi Master, right? This isn't even a threat to him. Like he's just moving through this like he's going for a stroll.
Well, and
so I did like that.
Yeah. Well, and even building on that, it takes it from this is Jedi Master Luke now doing all this, but it shows you just how powerful he is in general. Because you don't really get that, right? Like in Empire Strikes Back, he's not there yet. I mean, obviously he hangs with Vader, but Vader also we know now is like he's kind of playing down to the competition as well. And then in Return of the Jedi, he beats Vader, but he has to give into the dark side to get to that point to where he's really taking him out. This is the Jedi Master Luke that, again, never thought we would saw. Like, you know, potentially the strongest Jedi Master that we have seen. He's going through these dark troopers that, I mean, the battle droids pale in comparison to what these guys were. And again, just with ease, making his way through that hallway, and not just that, making his way through an entire Imperial starship, essentially untouched. Like he parked his car, walked all the way in, got to the bridge, didn't break a sweat, and that's the Luke Skywalker I think that we all wanted to see, and we get to see him. It's cool.
I think it's cool to your point, like because this is how many years after Return of the Jedi? Where are we at here?
What is the verdict like between 5 and 9? Is that where they usually land it?
Yeah. So it's just like you think about Jedis training all their life and like how green Luke is in the original trilogy because he doesn't have time to devote to really becoming a Jedi. Like he's in the middle of a war. He kind of picks it up as he goes along. Like to see that jump, like to who he becomes in such a short period of time once he can stop and learn to be a Jedi. Like it's such a cool thing to see that leap from who he was to who he becomes.
For sure.
It's just so cool.
Yep. And now the only question it's so hard to beat. I mean, and they've come close in a few scenes, but they're not quite there yet. But you get to this point, and the only question at this point, and I remember what was going through my head is who's the actor? Who did they get to do it? Because my thought was like they're gonna take the hood down if they even show it. I thought they might shoot around it, you know, like they have him talking from
just
the back.
Hear a voice,
and because obviously you could make that work, and then I thought, you know, there's that one edit that goes around where Sebastian Stan from the Captain America movies, he would be a good Luke. Don't get me wrong, he's
got
do
the
it.
features,
But that was my first thought. I was like, wow, did they actually get Sebastian Stan to do this? Like they finally did it. And then no, it's like they put it on there and like it's not perfect. A lot of people will complain about it, and they did perfect it for the Book of Boba Fett.
It's a lot better,
It actually is Luke Skywalker. The Force theme plays. Grogu pops out. Man.
Yeah, I mean it's so clearly CGI, but not to the point where I can't enjoy the moment. And I can't appreciate that Luke Skywalker's standing here in this show. So
it's clearly him.
They did a good job of selling it as best they could. And I mean, I have no qualms with it.
No, I agree. It was very good. And it's crazy how much they've improved upon it as well. Like the whole deep fake thing, I didn't even consider that they would do it. And they did it 5 years before that, and even longer before that when you count filming with Carrie Fisher. So it's like, I don't know why I didn't consider Carrie it with the Rogue One thing.
Before that, and we had Tarkin in Rogue One.
Tarkin was completely CGI.
He
was like a video game character.
Just crazy.
So I don't know why I wasn't thinking like, oh, they could pull this off, but like never.
Well, because it still always looks off. Like, you know, you don't want it to pull you out of what you're watching,
right?
Which I didn't feel like this did.
No. This was good, and like, I mean, you're so in the scene, you don't even pick apart like, oh, well, the haircut's not quite right, or the guy's face is shaped a little different. Like, you don't even care because it's so clearly Luke Skywalker there.
Yeah. And so,
now,
and then,
go ahead.
Well, are you going to the next thing?
Yeah, I was going to say the way that they do this almost seamlessly is first of all, they completely took us out of the Mandalorian story for however so long that was. Like, no one gives two hoots what was going on. Right? No. I don't even remember the rest of the episode. And now you've got Luke Skywalker's there. How do you draw us back in? And oh my gosh, 10 out of 10 on drawing us back into finishing the season 2 story.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier with they were able to keep this story focused on our duo. And that made all the difference. Because how in the world do you go from revealing Luke Skywalker to then cutting to a minute scene where you kind of forget that Luke Skywalker's standing there? Like, because you're watching this moment between Grogu and Mando that's just so touching. And Mandu. That's just so great. And it's such a good conclusion for their arc where it's been. Like, how in the world do they make you forget what just happened for that 1 minute? But they do. And
it shows you how well they wrote the story up to that point.
So, man, and looking back to like, we just finished Skeleton Crew. Some of the best parts of Ahsoka Andor. Like, if Star Wars can commit to just telling some stories about some characters, you can put other stuff in there. But like, if that core story is good, like, it makes all the difference. Because to be able to throw in everything they threw into this season and then throw in Luke Skywalker in his prime, wiping out a wave of dark troopers, and then suddenly you're so focused on Mando and Grogu, you've done something really, really right.
Right.
And so that's what they got to focus on, is give us these good stories with these cool moments, because that's impressive in that moment that I forgot Luke Skywalker standing there.
Yeah. I mean, just immediately pull you back in. And they had even
so good.
They foreshadowed this scene a little bit in this season. I couldn't tell you which episode. Well, I do know one episode. It's the previous episode where Din takes his mask off in the Imperial base, which I think we need some more explanation on why his face was able to open an Imperial computer as well, right? Maybe I'm just
got left behind, didn't it?
Maybe I'm just completely overlooking that, but I think we'll get that at some point because the storytelling in Mandalorian, by and large, is good. Yeah. But also, like, at some point, like when him and Grogu are just on the ship, he'll lift it up to eat and stuff like that. Like, you get the idea that this is not the first time Grogu has seen his face. I don't think. I'm pretty sure, like, that father-son relationship that they've had, but this is just like the pull on your heartstrings scene.
Well, and because it's
all of the Mandalorian,
it's probably all been incidental and glimpses, right? And it's not him really revealing himself to Grogu, which is full on. Like, this is, before you go, I want you to see who I am. Which is it's such a cool scene.
So good. I get a little emotional watching that. Those eyes. They just made like the cutest
when he reaches
creature
up and he like touches his face.
Time. Yeah, so you get him like right here-ish maybe.
Somewhere
after that. But yeah, he puts him down there. And then he goes off, and I mean, this is so perfect too. You talk about cameos, like this scene here. Look at that.
It's so fun.
R2's excited to see him because he recognizes it's like Yoda. You know?
In my head, this makes Baby Yoda canon, because I feel like that had to be what R2 said. He's like, dude, it's like Baby Yoda. Yeah. He's like freaking out talking to Luke.
Luke even gives that nod, and that nod that we just saw was perfect too. Like, kind of the end of episode 4, right?
Very
A New
Luke
Hope,
Skywalker.
where they're getting the medals, and he kind of gives the nod there, and then he gives the nod at the end of Return of the Jedi as well with on the celebration, right? Like he does that when he's looking at the Force Ghost, and he gives it to Mando there too. I thought that was so good.
It was very good.
And kind of like what we were saying, it wraps up. The story started off, Mando had to get Grogu back to his own kind, and he learns more and more as he goes. Well, his own kind is the Jedi, right? Like that's eventually where he lands. Like, okay, we got to get him to a Jedi. Well, Ahsoka's the only one they know about, and she's like, not in the business for this. So, how's he going to get him to a Jedi? And the whole story just builds up to that. Grogu calls out to the Jedi, and then just Luke Skywalker is the most obvious answer for who it could be that would come get him. And we're like, nah, it's not going to be Luke Skywalker. and then it is. Like,
and then it is.
They did so good. And he goes with him. So, I mean, they did a perfect job. And you got Din Djarin's whole story coming full circle where he's taking his helmet off. He's forsaken this whole Mandalorian way for this kid. And it shows how much he's grown as well. I think it's some of the best writing that we've had in Star Wars since 2012 when Disney got it, and for sure outside of Andor.
I agree. And then we obviously get that story kind of wraps up, and it's weird that it wraps up in Boba Fett, because I feel like there's a lot there with that tension between what Grogu wants and what Mando wants, and Luke's relationship with all of it. That wraps up pretty quickly, which is kind of a bummer. Yeah, man, it's just a really, really fun story. All the way through.
Yeah, all that should have been Mando season 3, but I also get it. Like, first of all, a pandemic happens again, so filming.
Yep, there was a lot of disruption.
Can't happen, right? Disruption. You also know down the pipeline you've got a Mandalorian movie that's going to come. You know this Ahsoka show is going to tie into it, and somehow you've got to wedge the whole Mandalore thing in it. Get that? Yeah. That's in my head. That's what happened. But I would have really enjoyed that season 3 would have been a prolonged period of Mando without Grogu, and maybe like you're just consistently following Luke and Grogu on the other side. But I mean, hey, taking a risk on a Boba Fett show, like, that's fun, right? Like, if your excuse for getting a Boba Fett show is like, hey, we're going to kind of wedge in this Mandalorian part, so can we have a show to build around it? So be it, you know. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Book of Boba Fett, but
I feel like it ended on a high note. I mean, we're talking about a completely different show, though. But you brought in Cad Bane, you had Cobb Vanth, who was a cool character. So I mean, the end of it was pretty fun,
pretty cool. Yeah,
Luke, we don't know what Cad Bane's future is, if he's gone or not, but he had a good live action showing.
Yeah. So, question for this episode before we wrap up. Is this the best Star Wars episode that there is, streaming series-wise? Just the magnitude of it, the story it tells. Is this the best one?
I would say in terms of, like...
Not is it your favorite, but is it the best?
Right. I think in terms of, like, how significant it is. How significant it was for Star Wars fans at the end. And how well it left, I think, the Star Wars fandom in the midst of some disagreements. I think it was a really important show. It was written really well, and obviously they brought in that ending, which was so good. So is it probably the biggest episode? I would say yes. I don't know that it's necessarily my favorite from start to finish. Obviously, Luke Skywalker showing up is one of my favorite moments from a live action show, but from start to finish, I don't know that it's my favorite episode, but definitely probably the biggest. So I would say yes to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably the biggest, best, most influential thing that Disney has done with Star Wars. I think the storytelling in Andor is probably the best that they're doing. I think that there are parts of Ahsoka that I like better just because I think Anakin Skywalker is awesome. Not that Ahsoka is better than the Mandalorian. I'm not saying that, but they're just little things I can nitpick here and there. And then there's obviously other Mandalorian episodes that I think I like better than this one. But just, again, for what was going on at the time, like, you're coming off of the sequels and you're kind of like, where is Star Wars right now? Like, can it recover from this split fandom? And, you know, not... the expectations maybe weren't met for the sequels, and then Jon Favreau's like, hold my beer, right? Like, he brings in Luke Skywalker and he's like, hey guys, streaming is going to work out for us. And the rest is kind of history. They've got a whole Mandoverse out of this. So I think it's the biggest. So next week, we're going to transition to another show. Are you wanting to go, you want to go Ahsoka or you want to go Andor? Or do you want to go Mando season 1?
Let's break up the Mando. We'll come back to Mando season 1.
Let's do Ahsoka next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's get Andor closer to Andor time.
Yeah, because we got to still figure out what episode we're going to do from Andor. There's a couple good ones to pick from.
But
assuming if we're doing Ahsoka, we're doing Shadow Warrior.
There's only one to do in Ahsoka, and it is Shadow Warrior. So this week we talk the return of Luke Skywalker. Next week we talk the return of Anakin Skywalker. Yeah. Also, I think we should throw in. Yeah. I think we should throw in that last episode of Kenobi, mainly, even if we're just focusing on the Obi-Wan Vader fight. Man. I could care less about the rest of the episode, but I think we should look at that fight at some point too.
One of the most heartbreaking moments in live action for sure. Man, so
that's so good. So good. You. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you thought of this old Mandalorian episode in the comments, and we'll be back next week to talk Anakin Skywalker. See you guys next time.